And good morning. I am Tamara Scott. Thank you for joining us for Tamara Scott Live as we bring you truth for our time, helping you live God's Word in today's world. If there is something out there happening, we will talk to you about it and give you maybe the information that you won't get in the mainstream media, most likely. But if God expects you to live through it, He's directed you how to do it. And so we'll gladly take you through that on this show. Need to thank a couple of our sponsors, Crave, Christians Reviving America, Christians for America. We thank them for coming alongside and making this show possible. We also thank Webcast One Live Studios for allowing us to bring the show to you from the studios. And we'll be making some changes in the next coming weeks as far as maybe adding some radio stations. We'll talk to you about that as things progress. Couple of things on the headlines. We usually talk about Common Core education. We usually have a segment somewhere along the way in the show. Not going to do that today. It's fun how it works. As you know, last week I was in Washington, D.C. for the AIPAC conference, the American Israel Policy Affairs Committee, and happened to be there with the speech of Benjamin Netanyahu, or Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. If you have not watched that speech, would you please do yourself a favor? Take time out and watch his speech. I don't care if you watch it on CNN. I don't care, Fox. I don't care where you watch it from. But take time out and watch. Listen, it's been so long since we've had a leader of his caliber. You will be intrigued when you see someone. To me, it was the difference. It was a warrior. You see a warrior who knows the alarm and is ready to protect his people at all cost. And his speech was so well crafted. It was concise. It was clear. He spoke with the courage of his convictions. He was not offensive. In fact, I thought he was most gracious. Heaping coals on the head of Harry Reid would be the biblical speak. When someone has really turned a cold shoulder to our only friend in the Middle East, the only stable country in the Middle East, and we've treated them less than fairly, and yet he was very kind and wishing Harry Reid well. It was also interesting. We watched this speech from Grassley's office, which is an honor in itself to live in a country where I or anyone else can go to Capitol Hill and talk to our representatives and senators, and to have the office allow us to sit in and watch the speech from there was just a real treat. We were watching Nancy Pelosi as she turned around during the speech and was almost, the nearest thing I can reckon it to, if I were good with graphics, I would pull out the Wizard of Oz movie and I would show the scene from The Witch where she screams, "I'm melting." And I would flash back to Nancy Pelosi, who had a meltdown during this speech. It was interesting to watch. Listen to Netanyahu's warning. Inspectors document violations, but they don't stop violations. And he's absolutely right. The U.S. is concerned with security. Israel is fighting for their survival. That will go with my guest as well today, who's joining me in studio, and that's what I was going to share with you too. We had an other guest scheduled, and I went, and I also had an open segment, and I was not sure how to fill it with such a busy week. We had the Pastor and Pew's conference here in Iowa, and Jendel and Cruz, and busy days this last couple of days, and I had not filled that last slot. There was a piece, and I just thought something's going to open itself up. I said a prayer about it last night, and I went to breakfast this morning and heard a young Bethany Blankley talk about her visit to, today she talked about Sharia law, but she was on the trip with us to Israel. She was on the trip to Poland and London, as we learned so much about other leaders in our time who have taken the strong road, taken the lonely stand to preserve a people in protection. And so after hearing her today on Sharia law, I said, Bethany, come join me at the studio today, and she was kind enough to do that. So we're going to take a little bit of time out from the topics we normally talk about, and don't think that they're not of importance. On Capitol Hill here in Iowa, we're still dealing with a bullying bill that needs to be stopped. The bill is not good. There is nothing new in the bill. The protections are already in the Iowa Code. The only thing that the bill does that is new, it removes parents further from the process with an exemption of telling parents when their student might be the one bullied. It also expands the state government, another level of bureaucracy. It also expands school authority, outside school activities, off school premises, and invites teachers to now stalk the students online and watch their social media. When you expand school authority, then you lose parental authority. Two people can't be in control. Parents are the authority. And so we really need to take care of that bill. You can call your legislators at 281-3711, 281-3711, and 281-3221. And call and ask for your House or your Senate member, whichever one you call, and ask them to please stop this foolishness of this bill. It's already in the code. Other things happening today right here in the Iowa Supreme Court. They're going to open arguments today on whether it's still okay to kill the baby in the womb via the telemedicine or the webcam practice. That was started here in Iowa, unfortunately, and it's not a practice that should continue. It's a very incredible decision and should not be taken lightly. And we need to be saving lives at all cost, not making it easier and more convenient to take life. So that bill opens up in the Supreme Court today, and I find it interesting that they're going to intervene, not being physicians, in the medical care that takes place. So enough said. You just need to be aware of those things. We're going to take a break right now, thank our sponsors, and we'll be right back after these messages. Thank you for staying tuned.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Credit cards are like grandkids. They love you, sometimes get out of control, and it's fun to get a new one. Who can stop them from piling on?
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of Des Moines. At the end of the day, you can give these grandkids back, but you're stuck paying off bad credit card debt. We can help you put the fun back into using credit cards responsibly. Right, kids?
Yeah! If you need help getting credit cards off your back, call Consumer Credit of Des Moines.
Hey, psst. Let me let you in on a little secret. You ready? Always try to do business with people, not places. Especially if you seek honest Christian business people. And when it comes to my car, I really need to trust who's working on it. Now, my family is so blessed. A few years ago, we found a family-owned automobile repair shop that operates as a Christian business also. Open, honest, reliable, trustworthy. It's AMCO on Hickman Road in front of Kmart. And it's a family-owned Christian operating business. This family treats your car as if it was their car. Everything from oil changes to transmission repair and everything in between. So the next time you feel the need to be at peace with your choice of who you can trust with your car, give AMCO on Hickman a chance to serve you. And tell them Max sent you.
And I am Tamara Scott. Thank you so much for joining us. Today in studio is a young lady by the name of Bethany Blankley. You can find her at BethanyBlankley.com. Bethany, Blankley. Mm-hmm. I said it right, BethanyBlankley.com. And I have a feeling that once you get there, I've not been on the website, Bethany. So once people get there, I have a feeling that there's a variety of topics and information they can find.
Right. So I talk a lot about religious liberty, human sexuality issues, Islam, and the overreach of the government.
Basically
so
anything that
everything.
Sets people off.
Yeah, it's all about religion and politics. That's my background is political. I worked on Capitol Hill and for governor, and then I have degrees in theology, and I've read a lot about much of the Islamic texts. So my perspective is biblical as a Christian, as an evangelical, and also seeing with a very different eye, having been in politics and understanding the worldview from a theological perspective, that the goal of Islam is ideologically opposed to everything that our country represents. And so it's up to my generation, for people who are 40 and younger, who I believe are going to make or break whatever happens in this country. And for people who are over 40, if you have children or grandchildren who are under 40, if you want them to grow up to be your age, then something needs to be done now, because I think that Islam has infiltrated our country in every possible way. We are fighting for survival, just like Israel, and just like many of the remnant of people who care about freedoms and democracy and representation in Europe, because they are also dealing with some of the same things that we are dealing with, but on a much different scale.
And so for those of you who are listening, if you want a replay of this show, we'll have the archive available for you right on YouTube, Tamara Scott Live on YouTube. Make it accessible for you, and that way you can send it to a friend if you think that they need to hear what we're talking about today. And I'll warn you, whenever we talk about homosexuality, Islam, Sharia law, immigration, there are those groups that just get really excited and love to blast it all over. And to that I say thank you. You've helped our readership and our listenership when we grow the numbers on that show. And when you show the clips, it's truth that we set forward. And, truth will never return void. So it doesn't bother me a bit. I'll just warn you that they're out there as well.
Yep.
So today you spoke at the West Side Conservative Breakfast in Des Moines, Iowa. Congressman David Young was there as well. And you spoke on Sharia law. I came to hear you because we traveled to Israel together. We traveled to Poland, London together. And I thought maybe you were going to talk about a couple of those things. And I loved it when you talked about Israel. You held up the small stone. I spoke 2 weeks ago, held up the stone. The lesson of Elah, the Valley of Elah, David and Goliath. We heard Pastor Rob McCoy give such an eloquent lesson. It's not just a little boy beats up a giant.
No, it is how on earth did someone come in and invade my land, my inheritance? And here I am having to fight for my inheritance because it's been given away. It's been invaded by people who have every desire to limit or destroy my freedoms. And so to me, it was very powerful because Pastor McCoy talked about how what could seem completely impossible can be made possible. And that it was the courage of David to stand up and do the right thing and to say, I believe in my God, maker of heaven and earth. And that through his courage and through his obedience and through his desire to tell the truth, he was able to go on this field and with one rock reclaim his inheritance. And I feel that that is exactly the stakes that we are in today with people my age and younger. We have an opportunity and an obligation to reclaim our inheritance because it has been taken from us.
And along that line, you pointed out today that David was a 5-foot shepherd. Mm-hmm. I don't know. You studied theology. I don't know his height, 5-foot shepherd. But the beauty of it is, up on the hill, what were the trained army? Saul's
and weapons,
armor,
with all kinds of armor and weapons. It was too big for him. And here's Goliath, who's nearly 3 feet. His height, taller than him, and probably 2 or 3 times in girth. So you have the most unlikely, and this is what I love about God.
There you go.
You have the most unlikely people to come up to do the right thing when it matters most.
And as you're talking to the young people, the under 40, don't look to your experts. Quit waiting on the representatives and senators. Help will not come out of Washington. I'm in the political game. I get this, and we must do what we can to make sure we send people of integrity and character who are leaders, like a Netanyahu, who will stand on principle and do things in Washington. But in the meantime, we can't wait for it to come from Washington. You're calling out the generation 40 and under.
That we need to take action now if we want to be our parents or our grandparents' age. Because the level of infiltration in our country in every area through immigration, healthcare, education, welfare, military, in every single area, Islamic infiltration is affecting our society. And the purpose, the importance to understand it is that Islam is a totalitarian political ideology. It is not a religion, as much as people may say. The entire purpose of Islam is to create a worldwide global caliphate, which is called an ummah. And the Quran is the instruction. It's the boilerplate, the constitution that says this is how we do that. And so there are 3 stages of jihad. 3 stages are explained in columns I've written. There are resources, hyperlinks that cite different sources. That's all on my website. And the point is that what people are seeing now with people being beheaded, that's almost middle of stage 3. Europe, stage 2, immigration has taken over, and they're invading and procreating. And so that is part of Islam, is that you go into a foreign land, you have more children than the inhabitants, in some cases 8 or 10 to 1. And then over time, 2nd or 3rd generation later, you have enough people in a neighborhood to create a Sharia-compliant community where you live in another foreign land and you do not comply with their laws. You create your own laws, and you make it so difficult that anyone who is trying to implement their own laws, if it's Dutch law, German law, French law, English law, that somehow those laws are not applicable to these people who have now their own communities under their own legal system, which is funded and perpetuates pedophilia, domestic violence, child marriages, and institutionalized rape of very young children, both girls and boys, because Muslim men, it is abhorrent in the Quran for adults to be gay, but it's perfectly acceptable for adult men to have young boys. And so the idea is, what I continue to say everywhere is that I am very much anti-Islam. I am not anti-Muslim. My goal is to liberate them from this enslavement. I care about women and children. I care about little children horrible things are being done to them. They are defenseless. They're helpless. They don't have a voice. And I'm willing to speak up for them because they have human rights and they have value. And I do not want them to be put enslaved and trafficking throughout the world. And the majority of Muslims in the world are illiterate. If they choose to not be Muslim, they are killed. In fact, Pew Research and Gallup have all done polls showing that any Muslim majority country, everyone who has been polled, the majority of them say that they support the death penalty for anyone who leaves Islam. So if you're illiterate and you're poor and you're under some kind of oppressive regime and you try to change or stand up against it, you're going to be killed. And so the reality is that the majority of people don't want their little child, they don't want their little 6-year-old, their sweet daughter, to be married to a 60-year-old man. But what other choice do they have? And so the reality is that people are suffering because of this ideology, and they want to implement this ideology in our country, on our land, and they are. Right now we have three fully Sharia-compliant cities in our country that are official according to their local civil law, which is Dearborn, Michigan. It became effective January 1st, 2014, where the city council, how on earth did these people get on the city council? How did they vote for this? 4-3 on the city council to have Sharia law in Dearborn, Michigan, which, by the way, the punishment for crimes they list are stoning, chopping off of hands, beheading. I'm not making this up.
And is this, now you're saying the city council
in Dearborn, Michigan,
2014.
It became effective January 1st, 2014.
And folks can go online and watch the videos of Dearborn, Michigan, and the big festivals that take place up there, the Islam festivals that happen. I mean, it is a total
enclave. And when you go to certain areas of the country, signs are in Arabic and
in the United
Farsi
States.
In the United States.
And so do you have photos of this on your website?
Not of the signs, but I can easily post them.
Let's
Sure.
get them on your website. So and they're in Dearborn, Michigan, because our listeners are just going to find that.
There have been Christian missionaries and pastors and the street evangelists who've gone to Dearborn, Michigan, trying to tell people about the Bible, and they have had rocks thrown at them.
They've been arrested as well.
And they've been arrested by the local police. And this is my point, is the government that was designed to protect religious freedom is now punishing Christians and people who are trying to speak truth, but they are allowing an ideology that poses as a religion to preach hate. and that's infiltrated every area of our society. Perhaps the most frightening is what's happening on our college campuses. And so the Muslim Brotherhood has organized all of these nonprofits that receive tax credits and also federal funding through grants.
Okay, hold on, because we're going to come back to that. Give us the other cities.
Okay. Dearborn, Michigan. Hancock, New York, which is up in the Catskills, but it's now called Islamburg.
Islamburg, right in New York.
In Hancock, New York. The other is Islamville in South Carolina. And most of these are in rural areas. They have bought private property. It falls under the guise of the Muslim Organization of America, Inc., and these names have changed periodically for alleged unbelievable IRS violations. And so what people were investigating under Bush and with the FBI and with other organizations was that these nonprofit religious organizations are funding and are funded by the Muslim Brotherhood that funds terrorism. So the backing for the Muslim Brotherhood that was founded in America came from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, some people say Qatar, Kuwait, and Turkey. And also there are multiple levels of the Islamification of America. So one of them is the actual Sharia-compliant city. But part of that is to infiltrate into our government, into our public policy, into our social life, and the way that this is done is very subversive. So you have Common Core now in each state that is teaching Islam, and you don't see anybody rallying or protesting about separation of church and state. But our children are being taught Islam through Common Core, because one of the people who was responsible for Common Core was a sheikh who was demanding that Hirsi Ali be killed because she was speaking about Islam, and fled Amsterdam because she was speaking out about female genital mutilation.
Okay, so the name of the sheikh who's...
I will get that. It's on my website. It's also in what is called the Betrayal Papers. I'm part of a coalition. You can read about these betrayal papers it's called theamericanproject.org. There are 5. I believe the 4th one was released yesterday or today. They all detail the level of infiltration of the Muslim Brotherhood in the White House, in the State Department, and the Department of Homeland Security, and how they are actively involved in the illegal immigration issue as well.
And so the
Common Core
is calling for the beheading of who?
Ali Hirsi. Remember, she was the Somalian who was also a Dutch citizen, and she wrote a book called Infidel. And I believe she's now with the Cato Institute, and she lives in America because her life is at stake.
We've interviewed on this show. I heard you speak this morning, and I heard some people question that you didn't have footnotes or that you were sounding the alarm and you were an alarmist. And I smiled when I heard it, Bethany, because yeah, you are. You're sounding the alarm. There's an urgency in your voice. There was in Paul Revere's as well. And I'm glad Paul Revere was an alarmist.
And you bring up a really great point. I mentioned that in a column I write, because Paul Revere was saying the British are coming, the British are coming. And what the Muslims are saying is Allahu Akbar. And Allahu Akbar means our God is great above all. They also are saying the creed of the Muslim Brotherhood. That's also on my website, which is Allah is our God. The Quran is our way. The Quran is our law. Jihad is our way. And there are a bunch of other statements, but it's all violence and it's all totalitarian.
And I'm gonna slow you right there. The jihad is our way. Jihad, we know there are several types of jihad.
There's three. Right. So there's 3 different stages of jihad, but their primary. I'll try to find this quote if I can. Right.
While you're finding that, if we go to the Christian way in the Bible, here's what it says for those non-believers. Here's when our president recently wanted to compare Christianity and the Crusades with what's taking place
a bunch of nonsense
today with terrorism and modern the beheadings. Okay, I'll go back to the ancient book of the Christians, the Bible. And Matthew 10:14 says, if anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, leave that home or town, shake the dust off your feet. Ooh, not quite the same, Bethany. I don't see any calls for beheading. I don't see anybody, as you said today, priests calling out to murder anyone. Luke 9:5, if people do not welcome you, leave their town, shake the dust off your feet as a testimony against them. Mark 6:11, but if any place refuses to welcome you or listen to you, shake its dust from your feet and leave to show that you have abandoned those people to their fate. So it's not quite the same when we look at Jesus. When you hear that we serve the same God, I'll ask Bethany to comment on that as well. Not quite the same. Jesus came to help the blind man see. Punishment in several Islamic countries is they'll take out your eyes if you do a various sin. Cut off a hand if you do a various sin. Jesus came to help heal the lame. This not at all parallel. Bethany, do you think it's the same God that people worship?
No, but what every Muslim has told me is that they love Jesus, that we worship the same God. We call him something different. But what I need to clarify is that, and so when you read the Quran instructs that that anyone who is not a Muslim is called the people of the book. The people of the book are Christians and Jews, and Muhammad was referring to the Bible. He does not discredit the Bible. He says that Muhammad says that Jesus, Abraham, Moses, they were all prophets pointing to Allah. And so what I say to everyone who says that, when you read the Quran, it says that that there are certain things that the people of the book believe, and that we have not received the full revelation, which is what the Quran is, and that Jesus was just a prophet pointing to Muhammad. And so what I say to them is, have you read what Jesus said about himself? Because I've read the Quran, and I know what Muhammad said about himself and what he claims to say about a God he calls Allah. But I'm not telling you, I'm not asking that you read the Bible. Why don't you read John? Why don't you read Matthew? Why don't you just read a few texts about what Jesus says about himself? Because Jesus does not say that he is a prophet to any other God. In fact, he claims to be God. He claims to be the only Son of God. He claims to be the King, the Prince of Peace, the High Priest. And when you see the eyewitnesses who met Jesus, he told them very specifically to follow him. He wasn't saying follow Allah. He wasn't even talking about Muhammad, because Muhammad did not exist or introduce Islam until 610. And that was only after he was ran out of Mecca by people who didn't agree with his ideology about some false prophet and the angel Gabriel coming to see him. And so he flees for his life from Mecca and ends up in Medina. And he is able to get mercenaries to join him, which is when Islam becomes the political ideology, and they start ravaging Jewish merchants and caravans and taking their women and children, their gold, their weapons. And that's how they started to build their form of Islamic government, was stealing from the Jews. So everything Islam is based on Jew hatred. It's based on stealing from the Jews, killing the Jews. In fact, the very first public beheadings were done in Medina after the third Jewish raid of caravans. And I write about this in several columns because I discussed how Obama's version of the Crusades was completely fictional. Because when we were in Israel, what was so disheartening to see is that there were no Muslims. There was no Allah. There was no Quran when Jesus was living in Jerusalem, when Jesus was living in Galilee, when the Jews were living in Israel. There was no such thing. It didn't come on the scene until the 7th century.
Right.
And so why on earth would Christians go to Saudi Arabia? That makes no sense. When you look at the actual historical evidence, you see that within 50 years of Muhammad introducing his political ideology in Medina, that the Muslims leave Saudi Arabia area, they go into North Africa, they go into the Mediterranean, they go into Europe, they sack Greece, they sack Constantinople, they sack Jerusalem, The only reason there is a mosque, the Dome of the Rock, on the holiest site in Jerusalem is because they knew exactly what they were doing. They wanted to destroy the Jews. That's the other part of the caliphate. That's the final stage of Islam, is that in order to get their quote unquote, they believe 12 apostles will come. In order to have their 12 apostles in their global caliphate, the imperative to do are two things. One, to destroy Israel, which the Bible says will not happen. Now that 2/3 of Israel will be destroyed and the women, horrible things will happen to women. The second thing, they want to destroy Israel, but we know in the Bible that will not happen. The second thing they must do, which was what Saddam Hussein was doing, was to rebuild Babylon. And in the Bible, God says Babylon will never be rebuilt. So the goal of Iran, the goal of Saddam Hussein, the goal of people who truly believe in the Ummah, the worldwide caliphate, there are two things they have to do. One is destroy Israel, and two is rebuild Babylon, which is in the area where Saddam Hussein was in Iraq. And the irony is that those two things are not possible according to God. So they're fighting a losing battle. And the good news is that our God wins, as Bobby Jindal says all the time. Our God wins. And that's an incredible encouragement to me. You know, to have a young leader to say, our God wins.
A brave enough leader in today's world.
Yes.
And this is what I'm saying when we talk about a Netanyahu, Bobby Jindal, I think Ted Cruz is as well. Someone who's brave enough to tell the truth, even when it's not popular and when they may be the only one making the stand. You're talking about what they're doing on the Temple of the Mount. And Bethany, I'm sure you looked over and saw the Eastern Gate when we were in the Garden of Gethsemane. The cement that they've poured in the gate of the eastern wall, the tombs they have now buried Muslims in front of the eastern gate, in an effort, one, to block the Messiah from the prophecy that the Messiah will come back through the eastern gate. I laugh because they obviously don't know my God. If you can raise someone from the dead, the God who created the world in 7 days in Genesis will not be stopped by a brick mortar in the gate on the eastern side of Jerusalem, nor will he be stopped by tombs. This is the man who will raise people from their tombs.
And to be honest, that's the only hope. Jesus is the only hope. Revelation 19:11 is my favorite verse in the whole world, because I know that my God is going to come on that white horse with that sword, and he's going to wipe out and avenge everybody who has been suffered and persecuted and killed because of his name. And so faithful and true will come on that white horse. And every fairy tale, every story we've ever read as children is based on that verse, where we have the hero who comes in and saves the day on that white horse.
Is that what gives you the courage for such a young lady, for you to stand so boldly today? You stood there boldly. You made some pretty broad, bold statements. Is that what gives you your courage?
Well, yeah, because otherwise I would join ISIS. If I thought I was going to be on the controlling or powerful party, then I would go join ISIS. Or there are three options. One, join ISIS, who thinks they're going to win. Two, go out in isolation and just remove myself from the world. Well, there are four. Three is to kill myself because it's completely overwhelming and depressing.
It can be, yes.
Or four is to stand up and do what is right. And David stood there, this little shepherd guy, with a rock, and reclaimed his inheritance. And Margaret Thatcher was the lone voice talking about and naming evil. And she warned if anyone were to join the EU, it would be their death. It would be their death and destruction. And she was right. And within 25 years, Europe has completely imploded. Islam has invaded. And all of these attacks are not isolated. Paris does have over 165 no-go zones. If journalists are actually ever doing their jobs, all they would need to do is bring their iPhone or video camera and go into those neighborhoods and take pictures and talk to people and see what that area is like. And it's happening in Copenhagen. Danish citizens are being beaten. There's a story I wrote about a girl who was beaten, and it went viral on Facebook on Christmas Eve because there were enforcers from a Sharia-compliant group who decided they did not like what she was wearing. They beat her and her boyfriend to a pulp. Her face was slashed in half. And she had someone translate her story on Facebook, which I've linked to a column I wrote about, that the attacks that are happening throughout Europe are not isolated. They are not extremists. This is Islam. This is Islam. In the Quran, Jews are pigs and apes. They are Allah's only mistake. The idea is that because they are lesser than, they are to be killed. They are to be destroyed. And because the goal is to destroy Israel, and because we are allies with Israel, it's very easy for Iran to say that we are the great Satan when Israel is the small Satan. So the question and the comments that I have been saying everywhere and continue to make is that not only is the man in the White House guilty of treason, but so are many of our Congress and senators who are voting to fund what is now ISIS, who have voted to fund with our tax dollars persecution of Christians. Our state and federal funds are funding persecution of Jews on our college campuses. And there are bills and funding bills that were passed in 2010, 2012, 2014 to fund what were called what Obama, if you remember, in September 2014, he called these Junior League rebels. If you remember, in January of 2012, he was saying that he wasn't really sure he was going to call that and claim that red line in the sand. He was saying in August of 2011 for Syrian President Assad to step aside so quote-unquote democratic and quote-unquote moderate rebels could affect political change in Syria. And what people do not understand, there's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, and it was posted in the Washington Post, and I have links to this on my website. I also have it printed out, is that there was a subcommittee House report that showed that that the CIA was shipping arms and providing quote-unquote communications assistance to rebel groups and mercenaries in Turkey. So when the overthrow of Syria took place, it wasn't by Syrians. It was by Turkish mercenaries that were trained by American troops and the CIA in Jordan and Qatar. So the CIA was shipping arms and providing assistance. And remember, in March of 2012, Obama refused to launch airstrikes in Syria. He refused to be consistent about drawing his red line because Assad was allegedly using chemical weapons and WMDs. And what did he do? He sent $1.5 billion to the Muslim Brotherhood. And what has our Congress done? By June of 2012 or 2015, this year, by June of this year, we will have sent $11.8 billion in cash to Iran as an incentive for them to, quote unquote, continue their nuclear disarmament negotiations.
Okay, so how can people find this information?
Well, I have information that's on my website. There's also information through the coalition. It's stopqatar.org. Which is QATAR. But there's also information that is on our website with these betrayal papers, and that is theamericanproject.org. But I have links to everything. I have sources. I don't have the time or energy to make any of this up. I don't have the time or energy or emotional stamina to deal with people, hurling all kinds of criticisms or threats or whatever.
Do you
I have to deal with care.
find yourself looking over your shoulder?
No, because no one knows where I live right now. But CARE has gone after me. They've gone after the Washington Times for publishing things. Well, they will make threats or they will say things on Twitter or through Facebook. Or they wrote a letter to the editor saying that the Washington Times published, to be fair, that I was making all of these things up. And the reality is I'm not. The Washington Times is not going to publish propaganda. They know my sources. They've seen my sources. I have sources of people who've translated things for me from Sweden. And I have friends in Norway. I have friends all over the place who are able to translate documents into English to show what's happening in Europe, but also what's happening in America.
Okay, so was Michelle Bachmann on key?
Yes, I mean, Michelle Bachmann and Franklin Graham needs our prayers. Franklin Graham, God bless him, is the only person I know besides me who is a Christian standing up publicly and saying Islam is evil. Muhammad beheaded people. There is no comparison to Muhammad and Jesus. We do not worship the same God. And Franklin Graham should know. He's been in hundreds of countries. He's seen the poorest of the poor, and he's seen what is happening to children because of Islam in these countries.
There are others, just so you know. They may not be getting the
national
like you
level
say,
coverage.
The media won't cover it. The
No.
media will not cover the truth because oftentimes you do get hit. The media I don't think.
Well, they're
many of
being
them-
censored. Right now, the mainstream media, including Fox News, is being censored because you have to understand the media today, after the internet, most of the journalists have lost their jobs. They can't afford to pay journalists anymore. In addition to that, the news is always determined by sponsors and advertising dollars. It's never determined by actually factual things that are happening. There's an agenda behind the agenda. And whenever there is a news story on the news, it is never the story. So when Petraeus was lost his job because of an affair, okay, that was obviously a bogus story. There's something behind the story, behind that story. And when Obama wants executive amnesty for however many million he says are coming from Central and South America, it's really 15 million, and they are not from Central or South America. They are Muslims coming in from all different kinds of countries. Nashville, for example, they finally reported something a couple of weeks ago. 60,000 black Muslims now in Nashville, from Somalia, Sudan. There are going to be more, 70,000 Syrian refugees. When you see what's happening in Europe, and I point this out, when you see what's happening in Europe, you see how the 3 stages of jihad are playing out and how they do not follow our laws. They do not have our moral code. They do not have any concept of liberty or freedom. And so in Denmark, there are Muslims who are quote unquote asylum seekers, and they're going into people's homes and taking their daughters. And this is happening in Denmark.
And we've seen the studies. I think the internet is full of stories of rape.
Yes, Sweden has the highest number of rape in all of Europe. 77% of its crime is committed by 5% of the population who are Muslim refugees. Norway has such a crime problem because of their Muslim refugees coming from Morocco, Nigeria, Libya, Liberia, that their prisons are overflooded. They don't have the money to sustain keeping people in prisons, and so they have started a repatriation program, and they are deporting everybody from their jails.
Tweeted that out from the APEC conference.
They are deporting people from their country. We have had enough.
800 people, I think they shipped out the first.
Well, the first year they did it was about 30. It was an increase in 30-something%, which is huge because Norway doesn't have crime. Neither did Denmark. Neither did Sweden. And so when you compare the immigration statistics to certain regions and the crime statistics, they are parallel to the people who are coming into the country because they are not coming to be Swedish. They are not coming to be Danes. They're not coming to be part of Great Britain. They're coming to infiltrate and take over. And for the first time last year, the number one name in England across the board was Mohammed. It was not John.
For newborns.
Yes.
Interesting. I am Tamara Scott. We're going to take a break right now, allow our sponsors to have a word. We thank our sponsors, Christians for America. We also thank Webcast One Live for allowing us to work out of the studio. And we'll be right back with Bethany Blankley. You can find her at bethanyblankley.com. Before you just shut it out and say she's an alarmist, turn on your computer and do some research. And you might be surprised what you will find. We'll be right back after these messages.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner of Service Legends, and my position is Chief Talent Officer.
I'm Nicholas Wonderscheid.
I am Bernie Homs,
And I'm the Service Manager.
Marketing Director and Client Relations Manager.
Everything that we do is about ensuring that we exceed your expectations.
Our clients are important to us. 100% satisfaction.
We're not just focused on heating and cooling. That's the easiest part of our job, actually, is fixing furnaces and air conditioners.
Everyone that we come in touch with, we want to improve lives.
Bottom line is, we've got our installation guarantees, 25% energy savings guarantee, comfort guarantee, temperature selection guarantee, property protection guarantee.
100% satisfaction guaranteed. Fixed rate or it's free.
All of those guarantees are backed up with a 100% money-back guarantee to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that you get what you're after.
Just fix them problem today. If they have another problem 5 days down the road, it's still fixed right or it's free.
We use what's called straightforward pricing. Our technicians are going to give you an exact to-the-penny price on what it's going to take before they move forward with any repair. That way you know what to expect.
It's the same price every day.
No surprises.
If you get off work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you come home, you realize that, oh, my furnace is broken. Now you need to call somebody out that night. You shouldn't have to pay more for that.
We're guaranteeing service 24/7.
We run afternoons, evenings, nights, weekends. We're staffed to work that.
Phone rings at 3 in the morning. You'll get one of our representatives answering the phone every time.
We're not sending you out to Timbuktu in some call center. It's our Service Legend team members, our mission control team.
I'll take a call anytime.
And then they answer the phones the same way during the day as they do at night.
It's a great day at your service company. How can we make you smile?
That's the only way to provide true 24-hour service.
When you're able to let somebody actually live in their home safely when they weren't able to do that before, where they don't have to stay up at night and worry about, is the heat going to come back on? Are we going to freeze the pipes? Is the baby in the room next door going to be sick because they got too cold? When you're able to help somebody overcome challenges like that, that's impacting a life. That makes a difference. I get goosebumps thinking about it.
I love the team. I love the people that I work with.
We have fun, but we work hard.
I call them my ambassadors of legendary service. If you could just envision what that is, that's who we're sending to your home.
They literally will call in, pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I want to talk to your manager. And I get on the phone, they're like, that technician that was at my house was the greatest technician ever. That's cool to me.
We want to brighten people's days.
Every person that we have going into the house has gone through an extensive background check.
Drug testing, we have a very thorough interview process that 1 out of 140 people make it through.
If we promise you something, that's what you're going to get, no matter what.
We're here when you need us to protect the safety and comfort of your family.
If you're not happy, we're gonna make it right.
If we're willing to put 100% money back guarantee on what we do, what type of work do you think we do?
Give us a call. We're there for you 24/7, 365 days a year.
Enough said.
And thank you for staying tuned. I am Tamara Scott. We're talking with Bethany Blankley today. We are taking a bit of a break from Common Core and the educational work that we do, although there are lots of things happening. The State House in Iowa has several bills on SBAC, the consortium. You can call your legislators and tell them we want local control, we want local assessments. And ironically, as Bethany and I were discussing, Common Core is tied into our topic of Islam. You may have seen it on any of the Facebook pages out there warning on Common Core. There, if you're, no matter what state you're in, you can probably find a Facebook page. Your state, just put the state name, Stop Common Core. We have Stopping Common Core in Iowa. We have Stopping Common Core in Minnesota. There's all kinds of them out there. We've seen the homework assignments on Islam, and many thought that was just a homework assignment, not necessarily tied to the Common Core, that it perhaps wasn't in a textbook that had Common Core on it. Bethany, you say differently. You say Common Core is absolutely teaching Islam.
Absolutely. It's teaching the 7 pillars of Islam in Iowa.
Okay, so we have what we call the concept, character matters, or character concepts, or whatever it is here in Iowa. What is it? Character counts? It's 7 pillars as well, correct? Integrity, honest, and it goes down. They seem pretty good. That's no way tied or will not in any way be able to be assimilated to the 7 pillars of Islam.
No, because it's talking about Allah and the Quran. And so where are the separation of church and state? Because we are not allowed to have a Bible. We're not allowed to pray in school.
Well, first off, that separation of church and state isn't in the Constitution.
Agreed.
It's in the Bible.
I'm saying, where are the people who are protesting the church and state?
Where are the
people who are protesting about the 10 Commandments?
Yeah.
Where are the people protesting about all of these different things?
You're quiet now. Well,
when Islam, there are no gays, homosexuals, lesbians in Muslim countries. They're all dead. There's no freedom of speech. So when you implement this ideology in our education system to say that it's normal, or that it's acceptable, or that it's okay, or that Muhammad was an astute businessman, or all of these other things that they put in through education while deleting, someone sent me something about Arkansas's education platform. They are no longer teaching the Revolutionary War. They are no longer teaching the Civil War. They're no longer teaching about George Washington or Abraham Lincoln. They start in the late 1800s. So the reality is that when children aren't even taught the basic fundamentals of our government and who we are, why were we founded and who founded us, and what freedoms do we need to preserve and protect, They can't, if you don't know what the truth is, it's very difficult to identify what is false.
So do you have a textbook that has Common Core on it where they talk about Islam? Do we have that available?
There are curriculums that as a citizen you can use a FOIA request, or you go to your state Department of Education, you go to your legislators, and you have them get you the curriculum, and you will see it. Now, some things are different in each state, and some states have rejected Common Core, like Bobby Jindal didn't take the money, he's not going to teach Common Core. And what someone in the government told him was that the government knows better how to teach your child, and he said, I disagree. I think parents know what's best for their child. The parent knows better than the government in education and healthcare and in every other area. But I did want to just mention, because we got sidetracked, I do want to mention a couple of websites. There is one that is called JewHatredOnCampus.org. Again, it's JewHatredOnCampus.org. And if you do a Google on YouTube, or if you do a search on YouTube, there's a video called Jew Hatred on Campus. It's the Jewish Voices on Campus, and it's posted by Aaron Goldenberg. And this is less than 5 minutes, and it will show you what is happening to Jewish kids between the ages of 17 or 18 and 20 and 21 on American soil, on tax-funded educational institutions that go from the Ivy League to state schools.
And so when we have these bullying bills, you're talking college, but we have these bullying bills that protect a certain group of kids, but it really doesn't help. Even though it's in the code in most states, First Amendment, protection of religion, freedom of thought, these things are happening.
Unless it's going to address hate speech or hate crimes, then I'm not quite sure how effective it would be. Because right now, no one is doing anything about the Jews that are being beaten. I mean, horrible, horrible things I don't want to repeat are happening to Jews right now in America.
Which should already be covered under assault.
Correct.
So
they are the number one victim of hate crimes in America are Jews. The column I wrote about this is in Western Journalism. It's on Red State. I believe it might be running in the Christian Post. And I go through I have a link to the video. I have a link to the FBI report. So the 2014 report showing statistics from 2013. The number one victim of hate crime, the number one victim group of hate crimes in America are Jews. It's not gays. It's not Muslims. It's not black.
What's the second group? In fact,
all of those combined don't even come close to where the Jews are.
What's the second group? Because I think Christians are up there.
They don't categorize Christians.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
And I can never get this group right, but it was either Jewish Community and Research Institute did a study probably between 2006 or 2009, somewhere in there, to see what the anti-Semitism was on the campuses. And they came out with a paper that they were surprised.
I was shocked.
It was as high.
I was absolutely shocked.
But they said it was as high for Christians as it was Jews.
Well, that could be true. I think some of the you always have to look at what is the criteria for who is assessing what information. And so they were looking at it. It should be Christians fall within hate crime because of religion. But I was doing research unrelated to it, and I was shocked to learn that Jews are the number one target on our soil, on our campuses that are receiving state funding and credits. Columbia University is the biggest employer and receives so much aid, and it takes up more real estate than anybody else in New York City, and they are number one for Jew hatred, for hate crimes committed against Jews. And yet, where are the liberals talking about no more, never again with Auschwitz and Birkenau, never again with Nazism, and yet it's right in the heart of Columbia University.
And it's not just Columbia; it's on several of our campuses.
But that's number one. So if you go to JewHatredOnCampus.org, there's a list of the top 10 colleges on our soil where Jews are being attacked and targeted. And if you go to my website, there are also links to these congressional reports.
Give the
and
website
votes.
again.
BethanyBlankley.com.
BLANKLEY.
Yeah, it's Beth A-N-Y, blank L-E-Y. When your mind goes blank, you can think of me. It's BethanyBlankley.com. There should also be some radio interviews that you can Google. And the last thing I want to tell you is that we the people are the government. The government is not in Washington. The government is not in the State House. You can recall people who you've elected. You can repeal legislation that's been enacted. And do a Google search of Islam in Iowa, and you will be shocked, because there is the Dural Arkham Islamic Center in Ames. CARE is in Cedar Rapids and Des Moines.
We have the first mosque, I think.
Yes,
in
you have the
America.
first mosque ever built in America. You have the Midamar Corp in Cedar Rapids. And there are several hundred nonprofit Islamic organizations that are fronts for terrorist organizations in over 30 of our states that have not been and should be audited by the IRS. In addition to that, there are jihad camps. It's Jamaat al-Fukra. I've written about this. You can see, I think, a column in Western Journalism on this as well. Jamaat al-Fukra camps are under the Muslims of America organization .inc. They are funded and organized by a Pakistani cleric. They are arming, equipping, and training people on our soil in over 26 states in jihad camps to kill Americans.
When people hear that, they're not going to believe you.
Then they need to go to these locations. There's a really great organization called the Clarion Project. And if you go there, you can click on a state and see which organizations are in what state, and also the information about who has said what, and also the AmericanReport.org, where we're outlining the links of the Muslim Brotherhood in the White House and how our government has been sending money to support Islamic infiltration overseas. Our State Department is funding and propagating Islam in Western European countries. And so what I say over and over again, the definition of treason in Article 3 in the Constitution: 1, levying war against the United States. 2, giving aid and comfort to enemies of the United States. That is a treasonable act. And when we release and pay $5 billion, five members of the worst Muslim terrorists out of Gitmo, and we pay someone via the United Arab Emirates and Qatar to release 5 Taliban members. We pay them to take them. And then we see, what do? They turn around. One of the Gitmo releasees went to a children's school in Pakistan. He made them watch the 250 children. He made those 250 children watch him burn their teacher alive, and then he killed them all because they do not want, they have no respect or rights for children, for education, for anyone who is what they consider to be Islam, but yet we are funding this.
Why are we not hearing about that? We didn't really hear the story about burning
because
a teacher.
Much of the news that is actually covered is in news organizations from other countries, because our news organization is censored. In fact, the British Daily Mail was the only one to show a picture of Obama using a signature of the Shahada. Now, the Shahada is your pointer finger up, your thumb pressing your middle finger down, your other fingers reaching your palm. The Shahada means our God. There is but one God, Allah, and Muhammad is the prophet. And when he did this overseas, the British paper, their caption in the photo was, "Oh, he's hand-waving." No, no, no. People do not understand Islam, and every Muslim knows what this means. When you see the pictures of ISIS, they are using the exact
I know a lot of people who point and probably
photo.
don't think about that.
No, well, it's intentional. It's different. But when you do this, it has to do with where the thumb is. It also has to do with what he's doing. And so the point is that when you see ISIS is intentional. There are pictures of them in Jeeps, whatever they're doing, it's the Shahada. It's the exact same signature moves that Obama was making when he met with Muslim leaders.
We've got to go. We're out of time. Can you hang around? We'll do another segment.
Sure.
All right. I am Tamara Scott. Thank you for listening. You can get a hold of this on YouTube, Tamara Scott Live. Bethany, you can put it on your link on your website if you wish to use it for your purposes. If you don't believe what you're hearing, check it out for yourself. That's all you're saying. If you hear it and you can't believe it, dig in and see what you find. You've given websites for folks to dig into. On the censorship, when we come back, maybe I'll start with that, because right here in Iowa, one of our former congressmen used to have a radio show that he was told he was losing because of his refusal to not talk about Sharia law.
And other people as well.
So
he's not alone.
If you've been challenged today, You may be tempted to ignore this. It's not an easy message to hear. If you don't know the danger that's coming, it's hard to prepare and stop it. So as uncomfortable as it may make you, check into this and decide what you can do to stop it. It's not overwhelming. It's not that we don't have hope, as you and I talked about, those of us who have hope in Jesus Christ, but we have things we can do, and you have action you can take, and Bethany's calling you to it. If you want more information, BethanyBlankley.com, TamaraScott.live. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and we'll have another segment coming shortly. We're going to hang around and tape another one, so hang on, and we'll have that one available on YouTube as well. Thanks for being with us. Be encouraged, but never be complacent.